Hey friends, it's Jeff. We're entering a new season. We have started 4 new podcasts on this channel and are working on our second book and hoping to elevate more voices in the Enneagram world over the coming year. If these episodes are important to you, there's 3 things you can do for us. First, you can buy a copy of our first book, Around the Circle, on Amazon for yourself and your 10 closest friends for Christmas. Second, you can review that book or our podcast with a note, 5 stars. This really helps people find our feed. And best of all, you can go sign up as a member at aroundthecircle.org. Even free members get half of the stuff that we post there. So go. Books, stars, memberships. This will allow us to create great content for years to come. Appreciate all you all. Appreciate your notes of encouragement, and may all good things be yours. Hey friends, this is Jeff. This is just the first half of our conversation. TJ actually had to run for 50 minutes, and while he was gone, Joey and I had a very animated debate about a host of topics in the Enneagram world. If you prefer higher level dialogue about stances, affect groups, and how each of the types push for control, our full 2-hour conversation is up at aroundthecircle.org for members. Go take a look. There you're going to see videos, our catalog of interviews, our audiobooks, college classes, and of course our Rewired podcast feed with myself and Katie Whitlock. Lots of stuff there. We just are concluding our deep dive into the Enneagram and gender. Go take a look. Appreciate you all, and may all good things be yours. Hey friends, this is Around the Circle. I'm Jeff Cook with the TJ Wilson.
Hello.
Joey Schewee's back with us. Joy's a stellar Enneagram teacher and theorist, if you do not know. She's a corporate coach and author of the upcoming book, When Working Together Doesn't Work, an Enneagram Guide to Productive Relationships with Coworkers, and that's coming out in March. This has buzz in my small circles. It's like there's a book coming out.
All right.
So we are always thrilled to have you, Joey. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I think I've been able to really preview some great portions of the book with you guys leading up to this before we even knew it was a book. I feel like we've been talking about this book long before it was actually written and published. So thank you for the platform for that, guys.
It's stellar content. Very excited for it. We're talking about a topic that apparently is close to both of our hearts, but we have not ever talked about this together, and that's mistyping. You may know that I started a podcast feed on mistyping recently. But the emphasis on mistyping is, I think, really valuable right now. And I would love to start us off with a question. And it's my favorite question recently. It's just, what does it mean to know your type? Sometimes we jump so quickly to numbers that we don't settle in on that essential. And so just to push into kind of the essentials for a second, what does it mean for a person to actually know their type in your mind, Joy?
Well, that's an interesting question when you pose it with the 3 of us, because as the 3 gut-centered types, I think we know in our gut. And I'm very aware to the point where I'm teaching when any other number says, oh, I'm glad I trusted my gut. And that's human nature to say that, right? Well, I really don't think anyone else can trust their gut if you're not an 8, 9, or 1. So I think you trusted your heart maybe, or you trusted your mind and your ability to reason, but knowing your number for the 3 of us, I think, has a lot to do with gut. Mm-hmm. I find, very few. I don't find 8s who mistype as another number. I don't really find 1s who mistype. And of the 3, 6, 9, I tend to say they mistype the most. 6s first, then 3s, then 9s. And really where I see the 9 is either with that wing, strong wing, right? 8 or 1, and sometimes the 2. But other than that, I really don't think as a group we mistype very often, the 3 of us. So knowing it for us is gut-centered. For other types, that's where I find an issue, because it's like
Why don't you just know?
Right? Well, it's when they come with, well, I read this, they use information, or the one that really kills me, especially when they're mistyping as an 8, is everyone has told me I am. Which an 8 would never, ever actually fall back on. So
I was literally in a debate with someone and at the end, they asked me to describe their relationship. They were an 8, their wife was a 6, and I was super suspicious about his 8-ness and have been, and told him this. And he said exactly the line, well, my wife told me that I was an 8. And I thought about it 5 minutes after we got off the episode, and I was like, damn it, Joey warned me.
There's a good chance that you are the head of the household, not an 8.
I love this in terms of what people come to the table with, in terms of what they are presently trusting to inform their sense of self prior to the number, which I hadn't thought about before. So we, like in our my mistyping work, I have a ton of people who have been listening to the podcast for a while. I'm like, how do you not know your type already? And I don't get it, but there it is. They're coming to the conversation having postured in a certain kind of way, relational, or with their analysis, with their intellect. And I think you're right. I don't have anyone saying, trust my gut on that. Beyond simply finding a number, what do you think is most essential to knowing your type?
In terms of landing on it correctly, or what you can do with it after?
There's some people who know that the Beatles wrote Let It Be, but then there's some people who know about the Beatles.
Yeah.
And I think there's a difference there. And I'm trying to myself kind of develop language for what that looks like, to actually know your type, where you settle into something that's beyond this person with a microphone gave me a number, as it were.
I think it comes down to the richness of being more balanced. I think when you know your type, you're always uncovering something new for yourself. It's the aha moments are so much richer than if you're trying to make yourself something you aren't, and trying to make a line of this book or of this podcast fit something that you resonate with. That's great, but then it's like a weird version of imposter syndrome. And if that's the case, then all you're trying to do is you're spinning your wheels trying to make something fit in you that isn't really you. And so I think the biggest issue behind that is you miss out on where the real, on growing your edges, growing beyond your edges, for sure.
I also think that there's an important distinction between knowing your type in a way that creates memes and knowing your type in a way that creates growth. Like it's when you are able to notice your behavior in a way that recognizes that it needs to change. Not necessarily able to take the steps yet, but at least recognize, like, this is something that's keeping me from living my best life, versus, oh, I'm an 8, therefore I behave this way, or I did that because I'm an 8, haha. It's like that doesn't matter. Nobody cares. It just doesn't matter if you're saying, oh, that's why. No, if it spurs change, or if it spurs the desire for change, like if it shows you ways that you can grow, you probably are landing on your type, and it means something.
I love that you say that, TJ, because it draws to mind for me, because our number doesn't change. Mm-hmm. If you the depth in going back, looking at your life retrospectively, right? If there's explanation for things that maybe nobody knows, but you're like, man, that explains that for me. Yeah. And you don't need to memify it, right? You don't need to make light. It's like, wow, that is my hard wiring. I've started to use that language so much more when I'm teaching. This is your hard wiring, and you can't go against your hard wiring. You can't make every piece fit if you haven't identified your hard wiring correctly. Yeah.
Right.
Got electrocuted when I was in 5th grade. Immediately went to in the morning. I went to elementary school that morning after the incident and had a new fantastic story to tell people because I had hit something real. The aha moments of knowing your type, I'm suspicious now of folks typing themselves without getting to that spot. We all have a journey. That journey up till that point is incredibly valuable, and no judgment on like sifting, but it's like until you feel the jolt, it seems to me that there's something to be said for just holding all things loosely before doing like more of the quote unquote the work. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's presently something I'm playing with. So
I like that. And it's almost like embracing the undeniable on the positive and negative ends of the spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Right.
Yeah. One of these applications that we were having a conversation. So I'll just say someone I knew immediately who is identifying as an 8, part of what they were saying was, now that I know this, I can be authentically me. And I'm like, no. Like an 8 is authentically themselves and unapologetically ourselves from the time we're 4 years old. There is no coming to a point in life, if you think you're an 8, where you can finally be you. That's not cutting it, really. And I think that it's not just specific to 8. I think if you're saying at 20, 30, 40, I can now I can authentically be me. I don't think you spent a lifetime up to that time not being you. And if you were an 8, you certainly didn't need permission from someone to be you authentically. Yeah.
Now, I might have needed permission in some
Yes.
ways.
Oh, absolutely. Push against
But-
conflict and yeah.
And the merging and the I know a couple of people that I think are 9s that like they haven't been authentically themselves for most of their lives because they just merge with whoever they're next to. And yeah.
But if you know you're a 9, you know that's part of authentically being you, is merging with someone else, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's a good line. I like that line. Well, we're talking mistyping. Unpopular opinion coming from me. I think that the recent emphasis on subtyping in mistyping, I think, is overemphasized. But I've gotten a chance to read a portion of your book on mistyping, and you emphasize the stress move, which I think is severely underemphasized when doing mistyping. And aside from contentious opinions that TJ may or may not share, I don't actually know. We're going to jump into
I agree.
stress
with you
moves.
wholeheartedly.
Perfect.
I just don't want to fight anyone by telling them
By
to
telling
stop using subtypes.
I think it's so much easier to pick and choose what you want to make something fit that's not you when you're looking at subtypes, because historically, and we can do another session, we'll do a follow-up session on subtypes, but because I'm totally shifting in the way I look at it. But I think subtypes, what's out there is very similar to the overemphasis on wings. Mm-hmm. And all of it is behavior. It's all a description of behavior, which invalidates doing Enneagram work ultimately. So yeah, I just wanted that PSA on subtypes.
Love it.
I concur. I think that's a great move. Speaking into stress, and this was something like I kicked myself for because we did our mistyping chart in the back of Around the Circle, our first book, and it was only at the end that I started really pushing into the stress move as a real revelation because of how different it makes a type, especially in contrast to the numbers that they commonly look like. So the one that comes immediately to mind is 2s, who may mistype as something else. But unless there's that move into more assertive, boundary drawing, aggressive posture in stress, this person is not a 2. And it's one of the most helpful little clues, at least for me, in terms of having those conversations. But when you come to just the stress move and mistyping, what goes through your mind?
So for me, what I assert, which was a great aha moment for me, especially in corporate. So when I do this work in corporate, when you look at doing processors, which we've had so many conversations on, 8s, 1s, and 3s are the doing processors. if I could categorize an overwhelming mistyping in corporate, it's people mistyping as 8s, 1s, and 3s because they see themselves as doing at work. Well, we're all doing at work. Not one number is not. Everyone is bringing doing. It's whether you're bringing feeling with it or thinking ultimately. And that's where I got to the stress move for myself, because only 8s and 3s, in my assertion, become less in stress. Every other number, 1s included, become more. Why? What's the logic behind that? Well, 8s, if you look at our stress move for 8, 3, and 1, they're all withdrawing types. But of the withdrawing types, TJ goes to, right, as a 9, a 3 would go to 9 in TJ. And that's less. It's becoming less. Right. I go to 5. It's becoming quieter. It's stepping back. It's observing. When you look at the difference in 9 and 5 versus 4, 4 is going to be emotion fueled. 4 is going, and 5 and 9 are going to be logic fueled. So you can't just say withdrawing automatically means less because, as you well know, Jeff, that's not the case for 1s ultimately.
I hear where you're going. I don't have specific language as you're pitching it, because initially I wanted to say, well, it's a withdrawn number. But you're right. Like 4s can be quote unquote too much. I assume that's what you mean. And so by less, they're withdrawing into the head. They're withdrawing from action. But 4s don't. In withdrawing into feelings, it's not necessarily a lesser move. Is that what you're saying?
True, because if you look at it, you can say and identify you withdraw, but you do become more emotional. Mm-hmm. So my language is only 8s and 3s become less. Like, you can run the gamut of less assertive, less talkative, less all the things, because we're pulling into our mind, because we're pulling into logic. You might become less active, but in the same flip, you become more emotional. For 1s, that's where you become more hopeless. You become, in low side stress, you become more dramatic. You can't really do that in 5 and 9 space in the ways you can in 4.
No, that's a cellular distinction. The thing that hits me there is that 1s, 8s, and 3s all process with action. Credit Joey Schewee. And all have withdrawn moves into their stress move, which says something about how that triad kind of finds itself in the world. It's I'm doing, and the way to find recovery, repair, restoration seems to look like a withdrawing move. It seems very healthy. Do you have thoughts on just we're moving from mistyping, but
it's just loving the Enneagram. It's what I love about the Enneagram. Nothing is by accident. Like anything I stumble upon with an aha moment, it's like, when I draw the thread all the way through, of course it makes sense that the motors, 8s, 1s, and 3s, what we actually need to do to take care of ourselves, because that's the point of the behaviors of the stress move, what we need is to stop. And not because we process there, none of us are actually terribly comfortable doing it. That being said, I think 8s are the most comfortable, because when we withdrawing into logic is really easy for an 8. It's not as easy for a 3, not because of the logic piece, but because of their own uneasiness within. And so, I mean, to kind of string a lot of things together, I don't want to tack on too much. I think really, I know everyone's trying to do this work, and you can have the best intentions in doing this work. I think this work really is the most difficult to do honestly for 2s and 3s. 2s, 3s, and 4s all have uneasiness within, but 4s already start with an internal reference point. So their uneasiness, because of their hardwiring, they're forced to look at all the time. But 2s, we know, y'all have talked about how much 2s avoid being alone, being introspective. And I think 3s have the same unconscious block to that, because it means dealing with their own uneasiness within. And so that's still, though, I say 3s and 8s probably have the highest stress thresholds as 2 of the 3 members of the assertive stance and the independent stance, because we can we can stand independent from things a lot longer than other numbers. That's going to help us avoid stress ultimately.
Yeah. And even looking to the like if you're standing at a point and looking toward your stress, like the thing that 8s and 3s are moving toward is still logic. And when we're talking about 1s looking toward that stress place, like it's an emotional place that they're moving towards. So there's a different kind of energy about it.
And it's solitude and introspection. I mean, it's not logic. Like it's Jeff, you get the raw deal, man, of the doing processors, because a 3 and a 9, when we do withdraw, it's we're withdrawing into logic and objective reason, and that for you is the secure move. What I think 1s tend to avoid is, why would I want to stop in solitude and introspection and deal just with the inner critic and just with all of my emotions about all that I cannot make perfect in the world. So it's I get the avoidance of stopping ultimately.
I'm gonna sabotage our conversation if I go into stress and security, which we're presently compiling notes on for our third book. So like I will gladly talk about this all day long. But moving to in the same spirit, mistyping wise, I would love to talk about 2s, 6s, and 5s, all of which move in to assertive independent numbers and stress. When mistyping 2s, 6s, and 5s, that can be real helpful, unless I suppose 2s and 6s may mistype, so that may not be as helpful with those two. But what do you see with the moves there when doing mistyping?
I say that 6s, we've all said this, 6s mistype more than any other type. It makes sense. They see themselves in every type more than any other type. They tend to take 6 off the table early. And I believe that after, you have to hold 8s in a separate category, because 6s mistype as 8s a lot. But separate from 8s, not after 8s, separate from 8s, 6s mistype is 2, 3, and 4 all the time. That makes so much sense to me, because 6s are shifting to process with feeling. That's 2, 3, 4 space. And while 6s vehemently deny their fear, they embrace anxiety and will tell everyone they're anxious, which leads to one of my other mistyping ways to know is if you're conscious of that fueling emotion, that's not your triad. So I'm always trying to say to 6s who are like, yes, I'm anxious, raise my hand first. I'm like, that almost precludes you from being a 2, 3, or 4, because for a 2, 3, and 4, anxiety is just part of their general uneasiness within. They almost can't separate it from shame and their own, what I say is just messy with what's inside.
I would love to push on that for 2 seconds. And we've had this conversation in part in the past. And so just to recap, I feel what I experience as the underlying feeling of my stress move. And I believe in our conversation, you said that when you move to 5, fear is not necessarily something that emerges. It does strike me that TJ experiences fear in moving to 6. Am I wrong?
Yes. Yes, you are correct. Sorry.
Do you have, I don't know if there's more to say there, but in my own thinking through mistyping, the two emotions, underlying feelings of the center and of the stress move, seem to be worth noting, whereas the underlying feeling of the security move, if somebody feels that, then I get suspicious.
Sure. I think the way I come at it is, I'm very aware that every human being feels anger, shame, anxiety, fear. Like it's possible regardless of type, because those are normal human emotions. My take is, if you're conscious of it, that is not your home base. Because part of it being your home base, your actual fueling emotion is, we're not conscious of it. Like the three of us, anger is so natural for us. It is so hardwired into us that when I'm being intense and people take it as anger, it truly surprises me.
Well, I'm curious on this because I'm really aware of my anger.
Are you aware of your anger, or are you aware of your resentment?
Of all things, I'm not aware of my resentment. I'm very aware of where I'm furious at the world, and I'm very aware of where I'm furious at myself. Resentment is one of those like things I need to say, I have now entered into that space I call resentment, and I should probably think about this because it's affecting my relationships. That's my relationship with resentment most of the time.
I like what you're saying there. I think my point, Jeff, is if it's just general anger around an injustice, like, I mean, things that the world can get angry at, things that are universally something you should push against and be angry at, that's understanding that you're furious. I think the three of us just have anger when we're free floating, when we are not actively showing anger. I still think it's right there on the surface. And that's what I'm saying. I don't think we're all conscious of all the time because we're comfortable with it.
When nothing else is going on, you're angry and not aware of it. That's the state of affairs that you're trying to name. Not that, like, so you would say that you are aware when you do get angry.
Absolutely. And what I've told
but not that
the
it's all the
world,
time.
when I'm being intense and they label it as angry, I say, and I've always said, you will know when I'm actually angry. There will be no guessing. It will be clear. But what I've lived a life of being excited at a basketball game and someone thought I was angry. Like my resting bitch face is angry. Like people take anger from me that is not angry. TJ gets a pass, right? Because his is much, if you got to live with a 9, in my opinion, to really see 9 anger. But man, that's your stubbornness. Like when you don't want to move, that's anger that you get to, the pass you get is, oh, I'm just not going to push against or whatever. I'm going to step back. I'm going to defer. I'm living with a 9. And I'm sure if I talk to your wife, DJ, she knows exactly when you're angry, and you will smile sweetly and say, I'm not angry. And you're a velvet wall that no one can actually push through, but it's still fortified by your anger.
We had a moment the other day. We were driving home and we needed to stop and get dinner. And she said, what do you want? And I said the thing that I thought was a good idea because we're going to get fast food on the way home. And she gave me a face and I made a face in response. And immediately the tension in the car rose. It was like, oh, okay, we got to deal with this for a second. It was very funny. I was not aware of how clear it was on my face.
Yeah.
That instance.
Yeah. So looking at 2s, 6s, and 5s, is that what we said?
Correct. 6s,
I think, are in a category all their own. 2s are so aware when they do become angry. When I have come across 2s mistyping as 8s, it is in spaces where they're in prolonged stress. I think a 2 knows enough about themselves, and I think like the first box to be checked is low self-confidence versus high. Like 2s just don't have high self-confidence. And that's check box number 1 for an 8, to the point where it's been called egregious. So I don't see a lot of 2s mistyping in their stress move unless, and I have a terrific example. I worked with a woman who, she checked all the boxes for me. She ended up being on a panel as an 8. And she said she checked all boxes on the panel. It was not until we got into one-to-one executive coaching session, and I found out that she had recently been diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And oh man, it's like her body became that because she needed that to take care of yourself. Because if you have stage 4 breast cancer, you literally can't be taking care of everyone else. Right. So I think for 2s, it's a little different. And then for at least in my experience in corporate, I find extroverted. I use the term extroverted, but when I ever ask a 5, are you extroverted or introverted? I have yet to have a 5 admit to being extroverted. They will tell me they are ambiverted. And that's almost how I know I've got a 5, right? But I do find that the more extroverted or ambiverted 5s mistype as 7. And it's not a stress space. It's just it's a space of I'm no longer in my head. I'm more comfortable floating my thoughts and my cynicism and sarcasm out in the world. So I find that the more ambiverted, extroverted 5s mistype as 7s, I find a lot of 5s in corporate space mistyping as 8. Tons. And my language for that is if you lined up 100 people who did not like their job and knew their Enneagram number, you're going to find very few 5s. Because 5s know that work inevitably involves people, and people is a drain. And so they find careers that they are well versed in, that they have a lot of knowledge in, and they show up in those spaces in a very secure space. And mistype is 8.
Another topic for future discussion is how often numbers across the board pick vocations that look like their security move. And I see that with 8s in particular, and I see it with 5s in particular. But myself, I'm a philosopher. This is the opposite of my repressed center, as it were. But a lot of 2s who are in nursing, in elementary school education, in therapy, these spaces where it looks like you are helping somebody who doesn't quite have the power. And it's there. I have all sorts of reasons for thinking that, but as you're saying about 5s, I think that's exactly right, in terms of, especially in spheres where they have all the insights and information of their little domain. Of course, they're going to come across as 8s.
Yeah. And I would argue, Jeff, that
Do it.
Being a philosopher is a very 7 space.
No, that's what, and that's exactly.
Oh, you're saying it does work for you too.
Yep.
Okay.
But again, for next time.
For next time.
There's so many things. We could go off on tangents all day, and we all know that about ourselves.
It's true.
Accurate.
7, 9s, and 4s all move to responsive numbers in stress. 7s and 9s are jump out to me in terms of numbers that might mistype. But do you got thoughts on this one?
It's less about the mistyping with 7s and 9s and more about I already said it to TJ, the pass you get essentially, because I think if you just look at 7s, I have always said, and the 3 of us have talked about the processing divide. 7s make people think, not consciously, but they make people think they had a feeling because they were responsive. Mm-hmm. So if the next move for a 7 after thinking is not to feel, but to be responsive, man, do we mistake that as a world, as emotion, their responsiveness. And so that's when that then leads to us getting more upset when the feeling wasn't actually had and expressed, because we think there's a connection there with 7s that wasn't actually there. It was just their responsiveness, their move to responsiveness. So I see that in 7. 9s, I say you're the most relatably objective type, TJ, right? And that is your responsiveness. Like, your withdrawing nature is to hold your relatable objectivity. Mm-hmm. But it's in your responsive move to 6 where you share that relatable objectivity to others, and that's where you're harmonizing conflicting points of view and doing all the things in the world that we celebrate 9s for. That requires you coming out of your mind to do that, right? Yep. 4s has always been interesting to me. I don't find that 4s mistype. Like I think I said in my book, when in talking about 8s and 4s, I just don't generally find the 2 types who arguably authenticity is the most important for us. I just don't run across 8s and 4s who mistype. Other types mistype as us, but so the interesting thing with 4 though is they're doubly responsive. Like in all the ways that a 5's only option when they come out of their mind palace is 7 and 8, and they're both assertive, both independent. For 4s, their only options are responsiveness. And so I think that's how you get you have a high functioning 4, is they're just comfortable being responsive. And it's like those lines to 1 and 2 pulled them out of their own world, their own self-focus of how does everything affect me? Because that's what they're wired for. But man, when they're really pushing into that 1 space and 2 space, it's cool in my opinion, because it's when it's high functioning, it's so relatable.
I also think that I don't know if it's because I'm a 4 magnet, but I encounter an awful lot of 4s. Like, I've heard people say things about the diminishing amount of 4s in the world. I'm like, I'm surrounded. They're are they all here? What's happening? I have encountered several 4s that mistype because of the box that they were told to be in.
Okay.
So it's actually, I've known several 4s that mistyped as 2s because they were raised female in the church.
Okay, well said.
And that's who they're supposed to be, and they're not allowed to be themselves. And I think like the mistypings I have seen with 4s, it has a lot to do with that. How firmly were you told you were supposed to be a certain way, and to what degree of unhealth did you believe that?
That's an excellent point, because really what it leads to is their motivating need to be understood. And if they were in an environment where they couldn't, then they lived a lot of their life in stress.
Right.
Yeah.
The only thing that jumps out to me here is when these types mistype with different numbers, I do see a lot of 7, 9s, 4s having a motive to want to fix things when things kind of are breaking, specifically the 7s and 9s, that is kind of a difference in behavior. Like the 7 is doing something very different until something really breaks, and then the fix-it mode is a different kind of gear that takes over, that I think is helpful when mistyping 7s. And so too with 9s, the energy that arises in a 9 when something's broken, similar to 5s, I suppose, on this, is I think a mistyping clue.
And uniquely for 9s, going back to meme culture and just the whole reducing the value of this wisdom by just a blanket statement about anyone. To say 9s are, unequivocally conflict avoidant, not accurate. If the conflict doesn't touch the 9s can absolutely come out of themselves and fix things and do it, with all kinds of assertiveness, because it has nothing to do with you. The conflict is not with you. So yeah, I see that.
TJ, you got any political opinions?
There's like, solving the logic puzzle is not the same as solving an emotional puzzle, and using there's a lot to be said about like what skills are required from the 9 in order to enter into that space of conflict. And if it isn't something that requires those things that are uncomfortable, I love debates, I love puzzles, I love those kinds of things. And there's a lot of times when I've entered into discussions in debates and like been the instigator, because that's fun, because it doesn't touch me. Yeah.
Bang. But I want to pivot to underlying feeling. You have listed anger, fear, and uneasiness within. Is that what you're going with in your book instead of shame? And can you unpack that for us before we jump in here?
Yes. It starts with the reality that 3s aren't, if they're coming to the table newly, 3s disconnect from every negative emotion. So a 3 who hasn't done any work on themselves is going to say, I don't have shame. Like that's so how could you even land in the right space if you make it specific to shame? A. B, I think shame and anxiety both stem from, for all types, a restlessness within yourself, an uneasiness within. And so to just pick one, to pick shame or anxiety, those crop up a lot. But I think we have to, going back to the importance for 2s and 3s of their own natural barrier to this work, it is, you got to broaden that focus beyond just shame and anxiety, because the real underlying fuel is what's inside for those 3 types is the hardwiring is
discombobulated. It's uneasy. Self-focus and self-reference is so naturally difficult for 2s and 3s that you have to look at the reality that it's not a specific emotion. It's the uneasiness within that breeds those kinds of emotions.
A lot of our language ended up pivoting into time orientation here and putting the heart triad in the past, that they take in the world through a past filter, and the past filter is focused on relationships. But when relationships go badly, these sit with 2s, 3s, and 4s, in my experience, and have motivating power. And that's what I mean by shame. And I do think the uneasiness within is correct, in that many of the, and I'll talk about 5s and 7s here as well, that they're just oblivious to the underlying feeling, but it still has power. I don't know. I'm driving towards a question and I missed it. Do you see that in 3s? Can 3s name that? Can they name past relational failures?
Absolutely. And when you were saying, leading up to the question that didn't come, what came to me was
Do it.
their values. You know, I set up triads and stances, and I say each give us 3 things. And what triads give us is the center we use first or most, our fueling emotion, and the values that drive our daily decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And the values that drive the daily decisions of 2s, 3s, and 4s are all relational. All of them. Adaptability, EQ, you know, whatever, connection, relationships. That's the hardwired values that 2s, 3s, and 4s are going to prioritize above all else. And so absolutely, a 3's going to connect with that before they connect with shame or anxiety. They're going to connect with, relationships matter. Because 3s know that's how they make their way in the world, right? Is through the valued relationships.
We were discussing like what 5s look like at work, and it's so often that you see 5s who look like 8s, right? And there's an ability to bring your own expertise and excellence and say, I know what I'm doing. I'm in charge now. And we see with 5s, you see that kind of excellence come out when they're in their field, right? And with 3s, you also see some of that excellence come out, but 5s don't care about the recognition. Fundamentally, like, they could be excellent in a forest with no one around. 3s are not interested in the forest at all. And the striving for excellence, the appearance of excellence may be equal, but 3s actually care if somebody sees them, and 5s kind of don't.
I want to stay here for a minute because 3s and 5s mistype, especially, kind of both ways, but really more 5s as 3s. They do mistype as each other. Mm-hmm. They're a lot now. And what jumps out at me is the competency, right? The 1, 3, 5 space. Absolutely. But what also jumps out is the disconnect from an emotion. Mm-hmm. So I'm very aware when I'm teaching 5s, and I know I have a 5, and they're embracing 3, and I say, here's the difference. Yes, you disconnect pretty much from all emotion. I say 3s disconnect from the negative. The difference in the main difference that I cite in 3 and 5 is I say to 5s, you are disconnecting, but you are not projecting positivity. 3, that's the core, that is the non-negotiable for 3s that I teach. It's a disconnect from negative emotion while projecting positivity. 5s can disconnect. They're not going to project positivity in its place.
Right.
And then the second piece, I say, what I've continued to observe, I believe the one emotion that 5s fail to disconnect from with the most regularity is anger. Yeah. And 3s do easily. So there's a big difference there. Mm. Yeah. And then one more little piece of that with the 3 and the 5 and the 4 I'm aware when I'm teaching the independent stance, so much of the things I say about 3s, 7s, and 8s check the 5 boxes because 5s have those lines to 7 and 8. Mm-hmm. So I find myself when I know I have a 5 saying, a lot of this is going to connect. Yeah. The fast processing, the high self-confidence, all those things are going to connect until we get to 3s, 7s, and 8s are very comfortable being big in the room. Mm-hmm. And that is never going to be a 5. Yeah. Especially if it's
not rehearsed and known ahead of time.
I want to bring that back up when we talk about stance and reference points here in a minute. One thing I really wanted to get your thoughts on has to do with underlying feeling on these fronts. Playing with the idea that we all can see perhaps the anger of 8s, the fear of 6s, and the shame of 4s a little bit more so than the other types. Question, is it the case that the same anger that exists in an 8 exists in a 9, or is the anger different?
I think that's a great question. I think anger is as subjective as the person, regardless of it, if they're an 8, 9, or 1 or another type. But what I always say about anger is its expression is different for all 3 of the anger triad types. So 8s don't discriminate who gets our anger. 9s absolutely discriminate who gets their anger. And I think 1s you do to a certain extent as well. Sadly, Jeff, I think your first hardwired move is to just turn it on yourself.
So to push into that a little bit, the center is the same. And if the underlying feeling is produced by the center, obviously there's going to be differences between each person, which I think that's spot on. It's how the type and the personality converts the underlying feeling into its next form that I think is really important to name, because if it is the case that both the 8 and the 1 have the same anger, but one of them converts that anger into an external move and the other converts it into an internal move, at least empathy-wise, you can say something like that same anger that you see in 8s turned outward is what a 1 experiences turned inward in terms of framing how things go. That's a side comment, but I would love your thoughts on this, and I would love to bring it to fear as well. But
I really have a hard time saying it's the same anger. I think anger is anger. I think you really got to touch on the expression of it first. But I think more important, if you really want to keep it in the triad, because anger is arguably at the top of the list of emotions that every type is going to express, regardless of type. I think the learning point in there is our comfort with anger when it's expressed from others. 8s, 9s, and 1s, it just doesn't ruffle us. I've said forever that Billy as a 9 is the best partner for me. And I don't know that I had language until I realized it's because he's okay. He doesn't get offended by my anger. And he doesn't get offended by my anger because he's angry also. And so that's the nuance for me, at least, Jeff, is I believe the 3 of us, when we're just out in the world living our lives, when anger is expressed around us from others, we don't have the fight or flight response I think that other types do when they come to anger.
Shame and fear.
Yes, I do. I agree. Yes.
The thing that I would want to say on these fronts, I would love your thoughts, especially the 3 of us being representatives of the triad. My definition of anger has always come from that anger is the emotion that's experienced in my resistance to the present, or something to the extent of when my will is thwarted. That's when anger, the emotion that I refer to as anger, comes out of my will being opposed. And I assume that's the case for 8s and 9s as well.
I think it's about reference point. What you just described does not. Absolutely. I could care. In my mind, my will is never thwarted. So
well, let me push into that for a second.
And then there we go. Yeah.
Let me push into that for a second then, because I associate reference point with stance. Yeah.
Right, but we each have a different reference point.
Correct.
You're talking about an external reference point.
But anger isn't tied to a independent stance. Yeah.
I think you have to look at the reality that the 3 of us, that TJ has an internal reference point, that you have an external reference point, and that I have an independent. Meaning, that's why I literally say, when I feel anger, it didn't come from outside of me. And I don't discriminate where it goes. It sounds, when you're describing what makes you angry, it came from an outside impetus. that caused
Not
you to
always.
be angry?
I mean, most of my anger, as you know, is actually derived from an internal experience.
But
I
you
think
you
you're
mentioned
right to
will being thwarted, and what else?
Well, it's this is from Riso and Hudson associate it with being resistant to the present, and I think that has legs. I mean, I would want to play it out for 8s, 9s, 1s, but
I don't find myself. It's interesting. Resistant doesn't land for me. But that's part of my illusion of control. I mean, it's back to the independent reference point.
when you walk into a conference room, do you choose a specific seat commonly that gives you leverage and gives you exitability?
Maybe when I was younger. It's certainly not the case now. No.
Man, I hear this from 8s nearly every conversation I have. They choose a seat where they can leave, or a seat where they have
Like the head of the
power.
table. Sure. For me, the piece that just jumps out when you're even talking about like the conference room space, it comes down to social awkwardness. And it goes back to me saying, I think 5s and 8s are the most socially awkward numbers. 8s are socially awkward and nobody would know. But that's why we choose the seat we do, because we're in control of what we know is happening internally for us. We're not going to get caught, essentially. 5s are socially awkward. They usually aren't very aware, and other people are. But the social awkwardness, all, in my opinion, comes from we're the only two coming to any environment without responsiveness or feeling. Everyone else, all of their types, are bringing at least one or the other. 5s and 8s aren't bringing either. And so what comes out of that, those kind of behaviors, again, I think is that 8 setting ourselves up ultimately.
We're going to mark down for future conversation underlying feeling as well.
Well, I think you said, not buried the lead, but like the important thing there is that the illusion of control. Of course, 8s don't feel resistance because they are going to fight anything that resists them. The
Or walk
problem is-
away or stand independent, TJ.
Are you all
Fair, yes, yeah.
Right?
And it's, I do not see the world as something that I can shape. That is fundamentally, like, I am not in charge of the world. I'm not in charge of my own house. I'm not even in charge of my office. I am a windsock being blown around. And I have a tremendous amount of resistance to the world that has so much to do with the fact that I'm constantly being told what to do. And 8s, I think within that same idea of resistance, even to the present, if we strip away the word the present moment, like there is a sense of I am going to make the world the way that I think it should be, the way that I want it to be. Like it is an unconscious, indwelt, like this is part of like the egregious self-confidence.
And that doesn't involve other people.
Yes.
That's
accurate.
key,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. But
Billion-
it is still like if everything was fine, you would be able, like if everything in the world was the way that you wanted it to be, you could sit on a beach drinking pina coladas. But also you would immediately get bored of that because you have a will to change the world. And so there's a sense of like of that resistance is less visible in the 8 because they are moving forward to address that sense of resistance.
I love it. I think that's important. I think what it's bringing up for me is something we have not talked about, but it teed it up really well with you talking about mentioning arguing earlier. Mm-hmm. I'm saying it. I'm going to say it. I don't know if I've said it on a podcast. I might have said it on one with Mom, but I'm saying it here. I believe at least half of the literature, the existing Enneagram literature written about 8s, is actually written about 5s and 6s. And the number one piece is misconstruing a need to be against and being energized by conflict making that arguing and debating.
Yeah.
We come across it all the time. We saw it a lot in parenting. Someone would say, my child's arguing all the time. They're such an 8. I'm like, no, that is where independent comes in. I don't need to sway you to see it from my side. That's what debate and arguing is.
Yeah.
I can stand independent from you seeing it differently. And quite frankly, I don't care. I mean, it's egregious self-confidence, but my gosh, if
also
I have
control.
one more person, and it is control, and I don't want, if they have a child, like the boss and bossy are two different things.
Yep.
And I take up space like the boss, and I am not bossy, because that means I'm paying attention to you, and you need to do you and let me do me. And I have zero desire to affect how you do you. Zero desire.
Yeah.
I'd love to, we're going to talk about stance and reference point here in a second. I would love to take a small step back, because when I think of the center for me is how you take in the world. Stance, reference point end up being processing and moving into the world. My assumption with 8s on the fronts that I'm trying to illuminate is that 8s expect rejection in relationships, and they feel their sense of vulnerability, and that's prior to making decisions. That as the world is coming at us, they have a filter that is colored by those two facts about themselves, and resistance to the present would be in that realm. Rejection, expecting rejection, and feeling a sense of vulnerability. And I suppose this may not be true of you, because like obviously you've done a ton of work on this, but it seems to me that I can name a handful of 8s who I do know this about, and I know what the move towards independence, getting into their future tools, looks like for them to appease this. They feel vulnerable, and so they're going to win next Tuesday so that they don't feel vulnerable. It seems to me is a common way that I see 8s embodied in the world. Thoughts on that?
I definitely resonate with avoiding vulnerability, but I think that's a 3, 7, 8 thing just in general. I think it's what comes with feeling last, ultimately. The avoidance of vulnerability. It does not sit with me or land on me expecting rejection in relationships. Really? Not at all.
We need to talk about that as well. Okay, 3 topics that need
so many. Yeah. And again, Jeff, I think it goes back to I adore the work that has been done, and I'm telling you, I kept saying when Mom would read something, when she would teach something, when she would say something, I'm like, that's not hitting. Maybe I kept saying it must be because I was raised by Suzanne Stabile. That's what I kept saying, right? I had a 9 dad who's incredible, and Mom, and so that's why it's not landing. And then I was like, no, this doesn't land for me. And I don't think it lands for most 8s. The problem is so many people are mistyping as 8s that when it is checking your box, it works.
Do you have a small circle of trust? Would you characterize
Absolutely.
your relational? This is what I mean by expecting rejection, is that there's an intentionality of relationships that I'm going to keep close people close, and this is the folks who don't make me feel vulnerable, who are not going to sabotage, thwart my will, to use that word again. Whereas other people are held at a different kind of distance, my assumption. And so in expecting rejection, I suppose, is lumping into that sphere.
And my small circle is small, absolutely not because I'm expecting rejection. It's small because I want it to be small, because I don't have relational energy. I do not have relational energy like other people have. I don't.
This is Enneagram theorists grabbing object relation theory and using their language. So comes from a different psychological theory that's getting, overlaid.
Yeah, sure.
That's the only I'm not necessarily committed to this language, aside from the fact that, as you were saying, this comes out of literature. I don't think it's a 6-8-5 thing. This is actually, it's a different move in terms of what Dr. David Daniels did in terms of slamming together object relation theory with Enneagram and the harmony triads. So
I will say, Jeff, what it does bring up for me is I do have a history of when usually females, almost always females, had an expectation of me and honestly wanted vulnerability from me and connection from me that I did not have to give. And I mean on every scale. The lacrosse mom who wanted to sit next to me when Sam was in 5th grade at every game, to the point where I would literally like wait to put my chair down until the game had started. That it feels like a tractor beam on me, and that there's no rejection or fear of rejection or whatever you were saying. That has nothing to do with it. It's you want something from me, and I know it and I feel it, and it makes me unbelievably uncomfortable.
Part of how, and I'm going to say this and then skedaddle, but part of how I understand like putting 2s and 5s and 8s together in that same space is like the idea of the expecting rejection. I wouldn't. I understand why that language would be like, no, that's not a thing for 8s. But I think that I wonder about if we were to say like expecting incompetence, expecting other people to not live up to my expectations, like that less necessary. And like I think that what you're saying about this lacrosse mom, it fits in there as well. Is like there is an expectation of how people are supposed to be, and if you need something from me that I'm not able to give you, the
rejection implies that I wanted the connection. That's my problem with all of this.
Yeah,
I don't want the connection.
How about
the connection?
I mean, it'd be betrayal.
Even does each? No.
You don't,
yes, we put betrayal on 8s, but you don't what? Say what you're going to say.
Well, I was just going to clarify, but we put betrayal on 8s. And what was your thought on that?
My thought has been what it was 15 years ago, and that is betrayal for me is not a specific person. The way I experience betrayal is all of these people in the world who have their reference point on me and make up all kinds of things about me without ever knowing me or approaching me because of their own intimidation. That's a betrayal that doesn't really affect me because I'm standing independent from it, and I didn't want there to be the connection that I'm afraid of betrayal anyway. Betrayal implies relationship first. That is incorrect if you're talking about 8s, because we are not relational to the point where beyond our own small circle.
I think that's driving towards what I would want to say on the expectation of rejection, whether or not that language works or not. It's the posture of being in relationship where I'm keeping a small circle intentionally by design because this is the place that I can execute my will in the world. I'm circling around trying to circle around the body triad on these fronts, but
sure.
That seems like
it still feels more tied to the relationship too much for me. I think as 1s and 9s in our group, y'all are much more. You lean much more into what a relationship is or means than I do, period.
All right, you guys are the best.
Y'all are the best.
She is Joey Schewee. She's got a book coming out in March. It's available for pre-order now on Amazon, and I'm sure that it's going to run out, so you should probably grab your copy.
You should.
In my view, Joey Schewee is the most creative thinker in Enneagram world, and I'm so thrilled that you made time for us.
Always for you too. Till the end of time.
Take that. Do you hear that, Katie Whitlock? Hey friends, it's Jeff. This is just the first half of our conversation. TJ had to run for 50 minutes, and while he was gone, Joey and I had a very animated debate about a host of topics in Enneagram world. If you prefer higher level dialogue about stances, affect groups, and how each of the types push for control, our full 2-hour conversation is up at aroundthecircle.org for members. Go take a look. There you're going to see videos, our catalog of interviews, audiobooks, college classes, and our rewired podcast feed with myself and Katie Whitlock. We just wrapped up our deep dive into the Enneagram and gender. Go take a look. Appreciate you all. And may all good things be yours.